All right, we are live, and today we are talking about our politics crushing the American dream of home ownership. And, as we were discussing this topic, we want to make it really clear this isn't about different politicians or left or right or anything like this. It's really about the fact that how much housing policy is created by the politicians that we elect every election year, even locally and nationally. And it's so important. And I know me personally, I've never looked at a politician and said, well, I wonder what their stance is on housing policy, right? And there are a lot of topics that we've been talking about, specifically America's Homeownership Alliance. Tino and Phil put out another report on the foreclosure moratorium and the foreclosure on opportunities that homeowners have. And we want to get into that a little bit, but these are the things. This is why we're doing this podcast, is because the more people that we get, the more voices we collect, we can take this to these local politicians, and you can be informed and educated on what topics are on the table, what housing policy topics are important to you, and go to the politician your local politicians and say, hey, what are you doing in these areas? And I know, Eric, you work a lot with the state and the local housing administrations or housing authorities, and there's local politicians have influence on that as well, right? I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's what this conversation is about, and it is politicians that are worried about clickbait topics and high-level things when we really have the opportunity to put pressure on the people that we elect to represent us, and to make sure that we share their same vision and values when it comes to housing policy and what they're going to do to help promote affordable home ownership. Phil, do you want to kind of kick us off on this a little bit on what kind of influence we can have?
Yes. So one of the things that we've been examining, most of America, the rank and file consumer of America, doesn't think about this, every day. They don't get up and think about, I wonder what my elected officials think about housing policy, and are they constructing policy that is constructive for me? Or is it going to impinge my ability to be a homeowner and sustain home ownership, et cetera? And one of the things that we uncovered when we were digging through this, we'll get to some real tactical issues that are critically important, but we found this article that was published, I think, in the Washington Post about the number of regulators that are in this space of examining and controlling and setting regulation and stuff. Now, all of them, in one way, shape, or form, report to the United States Congress. The United States Congress has the joystick of every one of these regulatory agencies. If things are not going correct or right or they're appropriate, they have the ability to do hearings and control, the purse strings for these organizations. But we, just on the surface, the article that was posted by the Washington Post identified 12 big regulators that regulate different parts of, the financial services sector. And just think about these 12 massive agencies that have to be funded, and their cost is paid for by somebody. And if it's paid for by a lending institution, you can bet that cost is passed on to the consumer in one shape or form or another. What they didn't mention, though, it was very easy for us to find 9 other regulators that they didn't mention. So, when we add these up, some of these other regulators, like the FHA that regulates every lender that makes FHA loans, like Ginnie Mae that regulates the issuers for Ginnie Mae securities, like the state housing finance agencies that regulate every loan officer in America and every mortgage broker in America. I mean, when you think about the regulatory burden on America, it's profound. And when we think of that, when we don't ask our policymakers, what are you doing to control this cost and this burden for me? I'm a consumer. I want to be able to afford the goods and services that are provided me, and I want it done in a fair and responsible manner. But do you need 21 regulators to be able to do that? Really? No. It's a profound mess, and that's one of the things that Scott started this discussion. We are bipartisan or nonpartisan. We don't really care what party's in power or who's supposed to be chairman of this or that or whatever. That doesn't matter. And what matters is that the members of Congress have their eyeballs on this stuff that they should be paying attention to. We're going to get to some tactical issues here, but I just thought I'd frame that discussion because consumers don't get up every morning and I wonder how many regulatory agencies there are that are examining the mortgages that are provided to me. That the answer is more than 20, and that's just ridiculous. So why don't I just leave it there, and then we'll go into some of the tactical stuff. Any other thoughts?
Well, I also wanted to have Eric chime in, because then you have the state housing finance agencies. So there's one for every state, and they control how the money is distributed for primarily funding affordable housing programs, right? For keeping people out of foreclosure, helping down payment assistance programs, and how much control do we have? Do state and local politicians have influence over the state housing finance agencies? Is that how that works, Eric?
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, if you're curious, on your elected official's website, usually they'll literally have a tab that says issues or policy or maybe something that they're looking at. Look at the website. I mean, that's a really great place to start. And if you're not seeing anything on housing on your elected official's website, that to me is a big red flag. It's not even on their radar. So if you care, let them know that you care. Let them know that you think housing that is affordable and sustainable is an important issue. So keep it local. Look at your elected officials, and they put that information on their website. So that's a very easy way to look at that. In terms of the housing finance agencies, usually they will produce a yearly report, which you can look at. Again, it's all public information on their website. You might be curious to see about where your tax dollars in the state went, what programs were supported, how many people were actually helped, how many first-time down payment assistance loans were made. That's all really good information. Again, kind of gives you a framework for where you live and how your money is used.
Now, that's fantastic, especially on the local level. Phil, you said you had some tactical or practical.
Yeah, let me just jump into some recent things. When Scott framed this, that if you're not asking your members of Congress, that's what our job is at the America's Homeowner Alliance. It's our job to ask the members of Congress, what are you paying attention to? Are you building barriers, or are you breaking barriers down? We do a really good job. And I hate to use this word, but we pester these members of Congress a lot. And it's because if nobody else did, just give you another example. In this infrastructure bill that's being contemplated in Congress right now, it's supposed to be $1 trillion infrastructure bill to help build roads and bridges and airport runways and other things. Not much in there right now about housing, except for the fact that members of Congress decided one way that we can help pay for this is to just tack on an extra fee for everybody that gets a mortgage between now and 2031. And, I just, nobody, no rank and file consumer in America tracks this stuff. They don't know what nefarious things are going on in Congress. They have no idea that Congress is about to penalize them. And when I say every mortgage, just think about this. They're going to tack on an extra 10 basis point fee. It doesn't sound like much, but eventually, in aggregate, it's going to add up somewhere between 50 and $70 billion of extra costs that homeowners are going to pay. And it's homeowners paying for things like bridges not in their state, or airport runways that need to be fixed in New York or California or somewhere else. And, the consumer of America, when you get a mortgage and you have 10 basis points extra cost added in it, you pay that cost for 30 years. It's not like you're going to, it gets to drop off at some point. So you just strapped on a 30-year debt to pay for something that Congress just does. We can find a piggy bank here. We can hide this in the legislation, and members of the consumer of America won't know about it. So we can just pass the bill, charge these people, and they'll never know the difference.
Yeah,
And
they're like 10 basis points is a rounding error. It's like that movie Swordfish, right, where they just took a fraction of a cent from every transaction and they made billions. It's kind of like that. It didn't. Fannie and Freddie just released their revenues for first quarter based on the 50 basis points that they put on for no real reason, and then they just took it off for no real reason. The threat that they thought that it was there, that was present, that caused them to put it on, they didn't say, oh, well, that threat doesn't exist. They just got pressure and they took it off. But they were pretty profitable in the first quarter, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, they just reported their second quarter earnings also, and Fannie Mae made net income, that's after taxes, $7.2 billion, and Freddie Mac made roughly $3.6 billion. Together in one quarter, they made more than $10 billion, and a whole bunch of that comes from the fees they collect from consumers that get mortgages. Just the fees, not the mortgage. That's a whole separate thing, the mortgage interest rate, but just the fees that are charged to lenders that are passed on to charge the consumer for getting those mortgages. It's a big factory, and that's the kind of thing that when we say, are your members of Congress paying attention to this? Is it necessary for those two government-controlled agencies to make $10 billion of net income in a quarter? Is that necessary? Is it essential? How much, if they made half that, what could we do with $5 billion more in America to help improve housing and home ownership? When you think about it in that context, those are the questions that we need to be asking members of Congress. And I would expect that everybody that doesn't really know how do I ask those questions, you don't really need to know how to ask. Just if you join the America's Homeowner Alliance, those questions are going to be asked for you.
Yeah, I think I would just to add some context to that 10 basis points. If you think about the 10 basis points, I think if you read the language, the average consumer is going to say, well, that's getting paid for by the lender. Well, yes, technically true. However, anything that the lender pays in conjunction with making a mortgage for a consumer is built into the price of the mortgage that the consumer takes out. So if we just said 10 basis points on a $200,000 loan amount, and that loan amount was taken out on a 30-year mortgage, that's about $6,000 in cost to the consumer in the form of added interest over the life of the loan. So this is, not a rounding error for the average consumer.
And you look at the 50 basis points that Fannie and Freddie put in place for that short period of time. What happened during that time? all interest rates went up.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it went, all interest rates went down. That's how they bake it in there. The other really important part of this conversation is something that I noticed. I was watching I think it was the House Housing Finance Committee meeting, and the word housing was used more than home ownership. And I think that's something we've got to be really, really careful of, because a lot of these, even the infrastructure bill, they're putting a lot of money into housing, which is necessary, but it's not the same as home ownership. What they're talking about is affordable rents, rent controls, fixed rents, and things like that. And we've already kind of seen a bias multiple times on investors, and it's just home ownership is the most important part of this. I think one of the most important topics that I think needs to be talked about more, and we've talked about this a little bit, but a first look policy, right, for REO properties, government-owned properties. Tino, you write about this a lot. Explain. Is your mic working? There we go. Yeah, do you want to talk about first look and what that means, why that's a problem?
Yeah, here's what happens when the properties are taken back and are after a foreclosure, and the investors, which are these large government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or the government insurance programs like FHA and VA, they take back a home, and it now is taken away from the owner. They need to, in a sense, find a way of having that home bought off again, right? Well, there's these large, huge funds that have been put together, monies that are, you would consider like Wall Street money, that are looking at buying a home as a great investment for them to rent out that home. Because they have these funds available to them in cash, they're able to put offers that are cash offers. So it's a quick buy. And many times they're not putting any stipulations. They'll just buy it outright without having to look at the place. And therefore, families that need to buy a home, which need to look at the habitability of the home, the value of the home and such, and they need financing, it takes a longer time for those transactions to happen because they need to be approved for the credit. You have to have an appraisal on the place. You have to look and make sure that the home is habitable, right? And so because these folks have cash, they're able to buy that home right away as opposed to the whole process of a homeowner. So guess what? Now the home is taken away from a homeowner. It's bought by an investment firm. They now hold it. And when they rent it back to a family, usually the payment on the rent most of the time works out to be higher than if the home had been bought by that family. Their mortgage payment would have been lower than had they been able to rent it. And the problem is aggravated because there's just not enough properties in the field. We're short homes. We're short around 6 million units, about 6.5 million units, according to NAR, the National Association of Realtors. So when you're short housing, you're also driving up the price because there's a lot more folks trying to buy the same house.
Yep.
Second, you got these guys walking in paying cash for it, so they takes it away from a family. And instead of getting it back into a family that could, in a sense, prosper, live in that home, own the home, and build equity in there, the equity is being transferred to an investment firm. They build up the value, but at the same time, you're extracting cash payments from those families that are higher usually than if they would have paid for a mortgage. So it's a double whammy. And so you're not only is that an issue, but you are impoverishing those families. It's costing them more to live in the same place. And second, they're not able to build the equity. So you're impoverishing America in the long run. That's hurting us. And yes, I have no problems with investors, provided that there is an equal playing field, that there's a way that that they both can compete, but homeowners are not in an equal or playing field. They're being challenged by these guys coming in with cash, and they don't have the cash to put up. So it's really unfair, and it's a double whammy. You took it away from a family. Instead of putting it back to a family, you give it to an investment firm, and it cost that family more to rent it back than had they bought it, their mortgage payments would have been less. That's double whammy.
Well, and there was an example, I don't know if it was earlier this year or late last year here in Texas. It was a brand new housing tract of about 143 homes,
Right.
and a hedge fund bought it. Like they bought off 143 units.
Yes.
And they're going to convert those into Airbnbs or rentals, and then they're going to cash flow then there's going to securitize the rental cash flow, right? So, or whatever they're going to do with it, but they're coming in and they're making these offers. So even from a policy standpoint, new construction, where we go? I want to mute you. I think that's you. So even new construction, and this is something that you can create policy about, is industrial investors can't come in here and buy new construction. It should be offered to single family homeowners first.
Yeah, so the first look issue, when we say first look, you're saying, look, instead of giving it, the normal first look period has been for 15 days. That's very short. There's a lot of situations where basically a realtor holds onto the thing, and in 15 days they get a cash offer, boom, you're out of the market. But if you say, look, you have to be able to offer it to a homeowner that's going to live in there, and for the next 90 days or 120 days, you've got to be able to find someone so that they get a contract in place within a time that you can close it, right? I would say 120 days minimum. You get that first look for 120 days, that'll give a chance for a family to be able to buy it and get in there. And now there's a much more even playing field for a family versus an investor that can come in, swoop in, and buy off the property, right? So the first look program is really, really important. And folks should be going out to their congressmen as well as their senators and saying, why aren't the first look programs longer so that consumers like me can have a chance to compete against the cash offers that are coming in from Wall Street?
Or go to myaha.com/join so that when we create these petitions, we forward to all the congressmen and the policymakers, we have more voices.
Yeah.
One thing I would add to Tino's commentary, and this goes back to kind of the economics and the numbers behind it, and this, if you're an otherwise able home purchaser, and the reason that you're not a homeowner is because of all the issues and reasons we just talked about, the inventory is not there, it's being swooped up by institutional investors, and now you're forced to pay rent, you're effectively paying a 100% interest rate for your housing. And when you think about it that way, that's criminal. That's usury in every instance. And so this is a very real issue, and it's not just about owning a home. It's about the things we said earlier. If you're a homeowner versus a home renter, you're on average on a path for wealth at a different rate than someone who's not a homeowner.
Excellent point. So on average, throughout the years, anywhere between 36 to 42 times is the difference in net worth between a family that owns a home versus one that's renting. So renters have 36 to 42 times less net worth than those who own a home, because a lot of that home is. And if you're looking at minority families, it's around 85 to 125 times different. It's enormous. It's absolutely enormous.
And that net worth and that generational wealth is a very good equalizer for especially the minorities and the immigrant families coming in and things like that. I mean, that's important to carry that through.
And Scott, to that point, for the consumer, when we're thinking about home ownership as opposed to rental, we you know, it's we're not in the business of deciding when a consumer wants to be a homeowner. We just want to make sure that when the time is right for them, that they have the opportunity that the landscape provides fair and equal and accessible opportunity. And you know, those are the kind of questions that we are asking members of Congress every day. Are you protecting the 30-year long-term fixed rate mortgage? Is that essential? You know, are you doing everything to protect that? Are you doing everything to protect the low down payment mortgage programs that people just simply can't save, you know, 10% to become a homeowner? In fact, you remember we had this research firm do this work a few years back, and the average time that it took what I will call average jobs, common jobs in America, to earn a 10% or to save a 10% down payment to become a homeowner. An average middle school teacher was 15 years, a firefighter 18 years, a nurse 12 years. It just, you know, that's 10% down payment. That's why politicians need to help us protect the low down payment 5% or 3.5% mortgage programs, because without those, people just can't get to home ownership. And those are the questions we're asking members of Congress all the time. And it's one of the reasons that we just simply got to get more. We have to get more membership in order for us to fill out the gaps in America, so that we can put that same pressure on everybody to help protect sustainable and accessible and affordable home ownership. That's why we're having these sessions every little bit.
And this is far more poignant at this time, because we have so many families that have been affected by the issue of COVID. There are so many families that find themselves in distress. About 2 to 3 million of them are still having problems in meeting their mortgage payments. That period of forbearance, as well as you know, providing people a chance to catch up, is about to give out. And when it does, there's a whole host of families that are going to find themselves in a foreclosure process, or their homes going up for sale. And so there's a huge group of investors with cash that's ready to go in there, swoop in and buy these properties out from families and put them into investment pools. And that would be a huge transfer of wealth from families to investors. Again, we don't have anything against investors. The problem is the unfair advantage that they have by being able to show up at the doorstep with cash and not give a chance to homeowners that would take a little bit of time to secure financing and be able to buy those homes given the time. That is a huge problem. It's not that there aren't enough people that can buy the property. They are eligible and they can be financed, but the finance process takes time. And what they're being beat out on is the timing of things. There's people showing up with cash as opposed to waiting for the financing process to take place. That's why the First Look program is so important. And you need to reach out to your congressman as well as senator. Make sure you join the AHA and add your voice to us to help fight for the ability for families to retain their homes, or for new families to buy in and not be crowded out by investors.
I think to close this out, you're right. Well, Tino, I think the 2 to 3 million is just that fell into the CARES Act.
Yep.
You still have you still have a couple million people. I've seen as high as 5% of homeowners are seriously delinquent on their mortgages right now. And that's where, Eric, your work on the local and the state level is so important. Consumers have to know on the national level, obviously, that what we're talking about. But if you find yourself in this situation, go to your state housing finance agency, go to their website and contact them, reach out to them. Eric is working with them on a very regular basis. They've got a lot of money that's been earmarked to help people in their homes. So being informed about your options, and knowing where to go to get those answers, and knowing where to go to have your voice included as we're trying to tackle some of these, what are we calling the investors, the big investors, the hedge funds and
Right.
things like that.
Institutional investors.
The institutional investors. That's the word I was looking for. These topics are so important, and I hope if you're listening, I hope you share this stuff. I hope you talk to people about this. Where 5 people, just shouting from this little rooftop called, YouTube and Facebook, trying to hope that the right people are going to hear this thing. And in the future, hopefully we can get some of those policymakers on here to have some conversations to talk about some of the things that they're doing. But I think we'll leave it at that. I think First Look is a policy that we can influence. Did you have something to add, Brian?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think the First Look thing is a really, really important conversation. Go to the My AHA. I think I have. There we go. Let's throw that up there. I should have had that up there. myha.com/join. And just add your voice to the list. It's free. It's an advocacy group. And when Phil and Tino say, hey, we've got the ear of these policymakers, we need more voices to support this opinion, you can be there and you can be part of that army, and we can fight for affordable home ownership.
Yep.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for bringing all this to the table and joining the conversation, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.